So, as I start writing this video, as always, Corvus Belli comes out with some great news and puts a video into a new perspective or dates it instantly. With N5 looming release and a delay for the rules for some faction, I don't know how long this video will be relevant. Will it stop being useful, then maybe become useful again? But who cares, I'm here for a fun time, not a long time. Hey guys, it's Ryan, and this week it's 4 tips for playing Caledonia Highlander army. This video is targeted at players looking to start this or play this as a second army. As it is an out of production army, I do not recommend it for newer players. These tips are similar to my MO ones where I give little tidbits from playing the faction for a good few years now and hopefully inspire some of you all to start playing the Scots in some form. With that, as always, remember to like and subscribe for more, and let's get into it. Caledonia is a limited faction with only 14 unique units, but in that there are some quality. Well, some of them are. With such a small faction, you have to look at everything on a profile to try and get the faction to work. It's easier with some like the Greys, Catarans, SAS and Usha, but it's harder but equally valid for units like the Scots Guard, Volunteers Beyond Chain Rifles, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the Mules. With a lack of hidden deployment and airborne deployment, we are a pretty honest faction outside of camo shenanigans. As such, you gotta squeeze as much out of every profile as you can. 2 examples we can look at this for is the Caledonians and the SAS. Yes, these are 2 fantastic units, but you can apply this to Greys and Scots as well if you want. So what about these 2? Well, they both have pieces of kit that aren't used as much. For one, it's grenades, and the other, it's forward observer. Let's say you've worked hard to run up to your opponent's DZ and now you have some targets behind a wall or a building. You could run round with smoke and melee them and grind through them, and with a Caledonian that's certainly going to put them in a bind. But sometimes you're in a fire team and bunched up and their Sixth Sense or MSV might do you in. In this situation, it might be worth just throwing a speculative attack to try and break the link and take down some mooks. It might weaken ARO PCs. That will make follow-up attacks easier. It is not the best, but it is risk-free, and you could displace just enough to do something. And if it doesn't, just YOLO the warband in. Grenades, even in this situation, can be a fort contesting dodges on 19s rather than hoping their middling fizz is good enough. Really, grenades are niche, yes, but when it's 20 points and total immune, it's another nice thing to have. We don't have the best BS in Caledonia, but we don't have bad whip, and sans the 2 hackers, we don't really have a way to make the best use of it. Well, except flash pulses and forward observers, which people tend to forget, especially on the SAS who have very close range guns, but a forward observe or flash pulse can catch something that might otherwise threaten you in bad bands. If you get it off, you can then follow up with a +3 to hit, and if you really want to mock your opponent, you lead that into a guided strike from a tractor mule. These are just 2 examples, but a lot of profiles have these little stretches that are nice to have if you want to do something. The CC21 on the Cataran and Greys, EM mines on Isabel, or grenade launchers on the Volunteers. Don't let the points go to waste. Try a bit of everything. Despite Caledonia having access to availability not 2, 3, but 4 total immune doggos, we're really not that durable. Nothing truly is in Infinity, but military orders and even Tunguska feels a little more durable than Caledonia does. Our 2 heavy infantry are more durable than the French, but that's like saying you can take a rock out in a 100-meter sprint. They are both 1 wound and dogged, including the Mormer, who is 40 points, arm 5, but again, only dogged. Galwegians are also dogged, SAS are 1 wound, and Volunteers are here for the warm bodies, and to be honest, not much else. This leaves us all kind of really squishy and sans ARO, except like unlinked missile launchers and snipers, and linked HMGs. So this point isn't to doom, it's instead to say, Memento Mori, you will die. But in Caledonia, we can take the bastards with us. Galwegians are iconic for this, with Dogged Berserk being able to potentially take 2 wounds and deal even more with normal rolls. Dogs are not going just 5 against range attacks, but will tear through a couple of units before they succumb to their wounds. Mormers are still arm 5 with immunity critical, but 1 wound, and before they go dogged and die, you can really think about how much damage you want them to do with that AP plus T2 rifle, or that damage 17 AP HMG. But hopefully now you can see what I mean with Caledonia, that you should push, smartly of course, but if you take a win, expedite your objectives. I've always said nothing is more dangerous than a dogged bear, and that is kind of the statement that some units in Caledonia need to live by. If you're dead at the end of the turn, you might as well push harder and break through. So you can die and take things with you, but this has the downside of, you know, dying kind of quickly. To offset this, however, things are cheap, but to offset that, it means you can usually take a second one to stand it up and take its place. Yes, orders will be spent, but a Galwegian who is dead has usually left a smoky trail for something to follow up on. Catarans aren't great, but they're also 23 points, so if you do ARO with them, which maybe you shouldn't, they can slow stuff down as they are in camo and do have a decently threatening gun. Sell every life dearly, and when you do, have another one to take up the task. This next point is for all those who are starting the faction and those coming into it wanting to play it more regularly, and it's simply to say that Wallace's inspiring presence is great, but it's not the be-all end-all of Caledonia. If that's all you want to play, that's fine, but there is a full, well, half-size sectorial behind him, so as a newer player to the sectorial, don't be tempted to always bring him. He is great and represents a solid core for the army, but is not required. Caledonia can run 2 or 3 irregular orders happily, and as sometimes they're just worth it. At this point you might get into the pang of, oh, but this could be regular, and that right there can be a trap. Sometimes building a Wallace list can be nice, throwing a few cheeky coordinated orders, 15 regular orders, with 15 lieutenant, everyone is courageous, it's pretty good. But while you might be tempted to slot him in everywhere, I don't think he's the right guy all the time. He's good, but 2 volunteers can be fine if you build a more traditional Infinity list rather than a Caledonia list. See my 2 lists here. The first one doesn't need Wallace and builds more regular orders with some good irregular orders like McMurrah and a lone Cataran, but both can make good use of command tokens flipping an order if we really need it. In the other list, I've taken 5 irregular orders, not much more, but 3 in Group 1 feeding a lone Wolver, McMurrah and Galwegian, and 3 potential attack pieces. We kind of need them to be regular so that the lone piece or the core can go forward as needed. Group 2 is equally as packed and needs its own orders, so this isn't really a structural list issue. This isn't an extreme example, but running 2 or more dogs is not only feasible in Caledonia, but sometimes expected just because it works. Then you maybe look at Galwegians or Catarans to put the points into more greys or to get Uxia, and then you have 4 or 5 irregular orders, and then you're reaching for Wallace every time. You fall into a list-making rut. The point of this section, before I start rambling, is that Wallace is great. Just try something else every now and then. Go grey heavy, go dog heavy, vary up. We don't have many profiles, so try out everything and skip things sometimes. Final tip for Caledonia is that honestly, sometimes it's fine to waste your points. So what do I mean? Well, if you're like me and you try to build your list cheap first or with as much cheap stuff as possible alongside your staples, unless you're doing a Wolver core, you might notice fairly quickly you're at 15 orders and 250 points. You might notice this keeps happening, because I certainly do. So how do you remedy this? Well, obviously you spend the points. Turn that Galwegian into a Cameronian. You've now doubled the durability for 15 points more. Got 2 SAS? Grab an Ixia, or even a 3rd SAS. Not got a Cataran? Grab that. But Ryan, you just said don't fall into rote list building. And you shouldn't. I'm just saying build what you need and then pick the next thing and try and fill up those last 30 points. You've got your core list, so now grab a Cameronian and a mule with a gun. You could grab a solo Wolver, solo Camo Scot, solo NCO Scot, Wallace non-LT. Upgrade everything into a bigger gun. We are a cheap faction after all. Just in Caledonia, going back to the first point, we only have so many options in the sectorial, so you might as well spend the points to use them since we have a backbone of cheap troops to support our few cool stuff. So that was my video on some tips for the Caledonia Highlander army. Hopefully this video remains relevant for a little while. With N5 on the horizon, it's all just up a bit in the air. Even with that, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe for more, and as always, Thank you so much for watching.